Get ready to time travel to one of history's most fascinating hotspots, ancient Egypt. This epic civilization left us with monumental achievements and mind-blowing mysteries, but as we peek into their daily lives, you'll discover some seriously strange stuff that would raise eyebrows in today's world. Join me on this wild ride as we unwrap 10 bizarre practices that were totally mainstream in ancient Egypt, yet would be major taboos now. Buckle up, and let's dive into the weird, wonderful world of pharaohs. Let's hit the harsh reality. In ancient Egypt, slavery was not just a thing, it was a thriving industry. The lowest rung on the social ladder, these enslaved people had fewer rights than any other class. So desperate were some Egyptians to climb out of poverty that they'd sell their kids into slavery as collateral for debts, or even put themselves up for sale, working off their dues until, well, often until the end of their lives. International slaves were the status symbol, but Egyptian slaves weren't uncommon either. It's a sobering glimpse into life when human freedom was just an afterthought. Let's dive into one of ancient Egypt's most fascinating yet ferocious friendships, their bond with Nile River crocodiles. These aren't your cute, cuddly cousins. These are behemoths that can tip the scales up to an astonishing 1,500 pounds and stretch over 20 feet long, making them one of the deadliest creatures on our planet. Yet, instead of fearing or hunting them down, ancient Egyptians revered their strength and built entire temples in honor. Yes, you heard that right, they literally built temples for crocodiles. Sobek, an Egyptian god often depicted as a crocodile, was at the heart of this peculiar relationship, with his temple being the prime spot where these mighty reptiles were kept. The reverence wasn't just symbolic, people from all over Egypt would travel to bring offerings, sometimes even live animals, for their divine crocodilian friends, elevating them to a status beyond human standing. Let's shift gears and talk about some seriously somber jobs, ancient Egyptian professional mourners. These guys weren't exactly therapists. Instead, they got paid to bring the tears at funerals, especially when pharaohs or other high-profile individuals kicked the bucket, with the grandeur of an Egyptian funeral often relying on a heavy dose of public sorrow. Having enough genuine mourners could be tough, so these pros stepped in with their skills to really drive home the grief. Imagine it, people wailing and hair pulling just for cash. That's ancient Egypt for you. Their role: to ensure the deceased was given an honorable send-off, even if it meant some heartfelt, though often fake, anguish. Let's dive into one of ancient Egypt's most peculiar fashion trends. Animal heads, literally. You might think we're joking, but pharaohs often rocked animal headpieces as a status symbol, or to embody divine powers. Female pharaohs, for example, wore cow head masks to highlight their fertility and femininity, while gods like the cat goddess Bastet were famously depicted with feline features. Since Egyptian rulers believed they had semi-divine status, they thought it was a great idea to emulate these gods by wearing animal heads. Talk about taking fashion inspiration from the heavens. You might think of magic as a fairy tale concept, but back in the day, ancient Egypt was all about blending fantasy with reality, and for them, that included believing in the power of magic. From fertility-boosting bracelets worn by women to influence the gender of their unborn child, or strength-enhancing jewelry sported by men, magical accessories were a big part of everyday life. Priests also played a significant role in Egypt's healthcare system, as they used what was known as medical magic to treat ailments. It seems ancient Egyptians preferred their mystical healing over conventional doctors. But surprisingly, physicians were quite prevalent and an essential part of the community during that time. One of the most widely recognized practices in ancient Egyptian mysticism is mummification, a process that's both fascinating and unsettling. It wasn't just about preserving the body for the afterlife. It was an art form with strict steps that had to be followed. The internal organs were removed, including the brain, which was discarded as it was believed unnecessary in the afterlife. These vital organs were then placed into canopic jars and left inside the tomb, while the rest of the body was dehydrated with natron before being wrapped in linen bandages. It's a meticulous process that aimed to ensure the deceased had a perfect appearance for Judgment Day. Their heart, however, remained inside, as it was believed this organ weighed souls during their trial in the afterlife. But let's talk about how ancient Egyptians took their afterlife obsession to a whole new level, literally. They didn't just stop at preserving kings and queens, they also wrapped up thousands of animals in linen, creating an entire zoo in the afterlife. Mummified cats, for instance, were so highly valued that harming or killing one was punishable by death. Even their sacred scarab beetles got the mummy treatment. But why all these animal mummies? It's believed they served as pets and companions for the deceased in the afterlife. And with estimates suggesting around 60 million animals received this ancient preservation, it seems the Egyptians wanted to ensure their beloved pets were right by their side in eternity. Let's take a look at labor strikes. Yeah, you read that right. In ancient Egypt, Workers were so fed up with being overworked and underpaid that they staged one of history's earliest recorded strikes. It all went down during the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Thousands of skilled workers walked off the job, demanding better wages and living conditions. This bold move wasn't just about getting more bricks or a longer lunch break. It was a fight for fair treatment and respect from their pharaoh employers. And you know what? The laborers won some concessions, showing that even in ancient times, workers were willing to stand up for their rights. You're right, ancient civilizations, including Egypt, were largely absolute monarchies with little regard for human rights or civil liberties. However, Egypt stands out as a surprising pioneer in labor rights history during the reign of Ramses III. At this time, Egypt was at its peak, being the world's superpower and undergoing significant progress. In Deir el-Medina labor camp, workers took an unprecedented step by organizing a full strike. This bold move was not just about bettering their working conditions, but also asserting their rights as human beings. Their demands were eventually met when Ramses III was forced to give in, marking the first recorded labor strike in history that would go on to inspire countless others across the globe. Ancient Egyptians took curses seriously, so much so that people would go to great lengths to ward them off. They'd offer gifts to gods and seek advice from priests, demonstrating how deeply rooted these superstitions were in their culture. The most infamous of all is probably the Curse of the Pharaohs, or the Mummy's Curse as popularly known today. This legend warns of dire consequences for anyone daring to disturb a resting mummy, with no exception based on who opened it, whether thief, scholar, or explorer. By the time modern humans started discovering these ancient relics, most tombs had already been desecrated and their contents pilfered, effectively rendering the curse operational. The tomb discovery that really ignited this curse craze was that of Tutankhamun in 1922, an unusually intact find given the history of tomb plundering. As the sealed chamber was opened, eerie rumors started spreading about mysterious deaths among those involved. At least a dozen people associated with the excavation reportedly succumbed to unexplained circumstances, further fueling speculation about the curse of the pharaohs. Moving on from these spooky tales, let's dive into another fascinating, albeit unsettling, aspect of ancient Egyptian society. Let's break down why ancient Egyptian royal families took sibling marriage to another level. Unlike commoner families where cousin marriages were prevalent, incestuous relationships among royals became a norm due to the desire to maintain family power and wealth within tight-knit circles. The Ptolemaic dynasty, which ruled after Egypt's independence from Greece, even popularized this trend, with Cleopatra famously marrying not one but two of her brothers. These sibling marriages were often more about politics than romance and served a symbolic purpose rather than romantic love. An interesting contrast to how we view marriage today. That's all for today's look into the intriguing world of ancient Egyptian royal relationships. We'll catch you in the next video. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to hit that like button if you found this informative and entertaining, and consider subscribing to keep up with more content like this. Until the next video, stay curious and keep exploring.